Hi all, and welcome again to another tutorial here on www.unitycookie.com. And in this tutorial, in the Lunar Lander series, we'll be taking your ship so it can move around that level or one of the levels that you've built, and then actually collide with any of the geometry in it or land on the landing pad and activate it. So if we take a look here, this is what we'll have at the end of this tutorial. Your ship, as we set up in the last one, will move around real nice and easy. And then if it hits just barely onto an object, it won't explode. If we hit it a little harder, it'll give us a nice random explosion. We'll be working on that too. And if we actually land it right on the landing pad, real nice and careful, then it activates. So it seems pretty simple, but this is really the core of the game, and you'll be learning quite a bit to put all this together, working with collisions and accessing render components to change that material, some of the light components, accessing scripts on other objects, all sorts of fun stuff. So we'll get right into that. Exit out of this Unity player, and into the Unity setup or project for this one here. Alright, so here we are back in the project folders that you'll have if you have the citizen version of this tutorial, which is always a great way to go. And that way we have everything all set up and ready to work. Otherwise, if you've been creating your own files while following along, that works too. We'll start by getting those explosions working so that the ship can go kaboomy. Always fun whenever it hits something. So if you open up under the explosions folder in your project here, and we have a couple that I've set up already, taken from the really cool detonator prefabs that you can find on the Unity site. And these, if we just drag them right into the hierarchy area here, we can check them out in the viewer and see what happens. I'm going to move this a little bit. And it's always good to check them out first to make sure they're the right size and they look about right. With the detonator explosions, you have a lot of really cool things you can tweak in here. Take a look at some of them. Good stuff to do there. We won't look at it in this tutorial, but definitely something just fun to look through and try changing some of it. So let's see how this detonator chunks looks. Pretty crazy. Probably a bit more than we need, but it certainly looks nice. In this case, one thing, a major setting you'll want to definitely look at in this is the size. So over in the inspector panel here, when this is selected, make sure you set the size to something that's going to work. I'll choose maybe actually even down to 5 for this. Hit play, and that looks about right. So changing the size is something you want to check for each of these. If you've changed it from something within the actual game, make sure you hit apply, so that goes and it applies to the prefab. Otherwise, if you're just changing it within the prefab, of course, you just need to change it and it's good to go. So check each of the others. I'm just going to set this one to around 5 as well. I'm guessing they each need to be about that same size. And those should be good to go. And then we need to set up our player ship so that it will actually explode and use these that we've created or set up and gotten ready. So if you drag in the ship prefab right into your hierarchy from the project and just set it up in a fairly good location. It doesn't really matter yet exactly where it is. I'm going to put mine right about there. Oops. Move my viewport around a bit. Okay, so if you have your ship in there, looking pretty and ready to go, the next thing we'll need to do is open up the script that's on it, and you can do that. Handy way is to select the object in the game view here, or in the scene view, and then over on the right hand side you'll have all the components on it, and you can click on this little gear looking icon and go edit script. Another way to do that would be simply select the prefab, edit it from there, or even just find it, of course, in your folders if you know exactly where it is and which one you're looking for. In this case, simply player controller right here. So in the script, in the player controller script, we're going to need to create some variables, or actually just one in this case. We'll create an array, another new thing we get to learn here, to hold all of the explosions. So we'll do the usual var to create this variable, and we'll call it ship explosions. And then the same colon. We're going to tell this what this is going to be. So the name of the variable is ship explosions, and it is just a game object. Oops. but we actually want this to be an array that will be filled with game objects. So then we put the two brackets on the end, and of course a semicolon to end it. And just for those of you, again, like myself when I started this, who are like, what the heck is an array? All it is instead of a regular variable being one single item, an array is sort of a bucket of items. And generally it's just one single type. So in this case we're telling Unity these are only going to be game objects inside of here. So the name again is Ship Explosions, the type is game object, and it's a bucket of them, an array. So we'll save that and go back into Unity. Everything compiles okay with that quick variable, so nothing shows up down here in red. So if we select our ship now in the player controller down here, we see Ship Explosions shows up in the inspector. And if you click the little arrow down here, or that triangle, we can see the size of that array, which is how many items are inside of it. And we, in this case, have 3 different explosions, so we'll change that size to 3. And you can go ahead and just drag and drop each of these into their own slot, like so. One way to save just one extra step is if this is initially 0, you can simply drag these right onto that, and it will appear, and it'll bring up the array size as it needs to. Doesn't make any difference either way. Usually I just like to set the size so I know exactly what I'm doing, but no biggie. Okay, so we have each of those set up there, and then in the code we want to actually do something with these. So what we'll do is create a custom function. So like we had up above here, function start, function update. Again, where functions are simply an action, something that's going to happen, and function start always happens as soon as the script comes into the game or comes into existence, you might think of it as, and function update happens every single frame. Any custom functions, you have to call them yourself. So by placing them in here, they won't necessarily do anything at all unless you call them, and we'll get to that a little later. So to start, we need our function, and let's call it explode. And the same thing at the end of every function, when you declare it, as it's called, you have to make sure you put the parentheses on the end here, and then the curly brackets tell it that inside of here stuff is going to happen for explode. And in this case, what we want to do is first choose a random explosion, and then we're going to spawn that explosion in exactly where the ship is, make it do its thing, and then destroy the ship. And one thing to be careful here is just to make sure you always destroy the ship or whatever is calling up this explosion or whatever it might be after, of course, you call the function. So first we want to say explode and then destroy. Otherwise, of course, it's going to destroy itself and then it'll error out because there's nothing to call the explode. Or simply won't happen. So just in case you're getting any of that order a little differently, make sure we work it this way. So we're going to get a random explosion, and to do that, in this case we'll create a quick, just a temporary variable down here. And whenever you create a variable inside of a function, it only exists inside of that function. So in this case, let's see, I'm going to call this a variable random number. And that means I cannot call this variable, I can't use it anywhere else, whether it's in function update or start or any other function. It only exists here. I can create another variable with no problem in any of these other functions and use that same name, and it won't be a conflict, because as far as these other functions are concerned, this does not exist unless I'm actually in here. So just FYI there. Okay, so variable name is random number, type is just an integer. So that means anything like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, blah, 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 up to any number, but it's not 1.025 or anything like that. It's simply a whole number. So I'm just telling it's an int for integer, and now we're going to set that. So we say random number equals, and we want this to be just random, so random dot range is how we call a random number. And then we have these parentheses, and inside of here we just need to tell it the minimum and the maximum. So the minimum in our case is 0, and the maximum is going to be the length of the ship explosions. So we'll say ship explosions dot length. Simple as that. So what this is doing is, as it probably seems pretty obviously, but just in case, it is, oh no, I deleted my code. Alright, there we go. So it's going to choose a random number anywhere between 0 and the length of the number of explosions that we have, the length of this array. So our array is 3 numbers long, so we're either going to get a 0, a 1, or a 2. Or a 3, you might think, if any of you are looking at this closely, because technically it's from 0 to explosions.length, right? And since our length is 3, this is something I ran into for a while when I was first learning, and finally looked it up in the I guess the Unity resources, and realized, aha, what the random number actually does is it's smart in a way, but it can trick you up. If it's an integer that it knows it's generating and not a float, which would be anything, again with a decimal at the end or something, it will never choose the very last number, which actually works out because in this case we can say 0 to length, and it will actually only give us 0, 1, 2. As you can see, Unity in the inspector here calls this actually element 0, 1, 2. As in a lot of code languages, the arrays will start numbering themselves at 0, not at 1, as we usually think in life. You say, oh, there's 3 apples, apple 1, apple 2, apple 3. It will say explosion 0, explosion 1, explosion 2, which can be a little bit confusing at first. The first timers, I know I went through a stage of that, but just the way it is anyway. So we're going to call this number a random number anywhere from 0 to explosions.length. The last number won't be called, so it'll only be 0, 1, or 2. So we're going to get one of these, or a number that relates to one of these 3 items in the array. Hope that didn't confuse anyone too much. I'm trying to go over as much in detail as I can. As always, ask questions on the Unity cookie side if you need anything at all on that. So we have a random number. Now what are we actually going to do with it? Well, first of all, let's name this correctly. That'll be a help. Second of all, we need to use this to get an explosion out of the array. And to do that, as we see here, each of these parts in the array, or pieces, or whatever you want to call it, have this element number, and we can simply call that to create it. So we're going to instantiate the explosion, or spawn it in, and just as it sounds, we do instantiate, and we say ship explosions. And now we want to pick out exactly the explosion that's coming from this random number. And that's where these brackets come back into play. So if you remember up here, we said it's a game object, and we told it was an array by putting these brackets, and we use this to choose which item in that array. So ship explosions, and then we can just type random number. And you could just hard code this as well. If you knew you wanted exactly, say, element number 2, this detonator multi, and only that one, you could just say 2, and it will pull that one from the array, in this case, instantiate it and make it explode. But of course, we want this nice random number, so 0, 1, or 2. And then we want it to be placed at the exact same position as the player controller, so we can just say transform.position, and the same rotation, transform.rotation. So with this instantiate call, all you need is the item that you're going to create, or sort of, spawn or drop into the game. So what it is, where it's going to appear, and the rotation of it. Just need those 3 items, and it'll spawn it right in. And then after this, we just want to destroy the ship. So this actual game object, I suppose, that we're using. Since this script, the player controller will be on the script, or just deleting the game object, or destroying it, I mean. Okay, so now we have function explode happening, and let's make sure we didn't code anything wrong in there. Go back to Unity, and it's compiled. Nothing came up in red, so we're good. And we want to test this. Obviously, we'd have to write some more code. We can keep going further and make, just make the collisions work, etc. See if it happens. But I usually like to check as I'm going that my code is really actually working. So up in the start, I'm going to give you guys another new bit of code that can really help. Is the yield code. So what this will do is wait until something has happened or return true, and then do whatever comes after it. So I'm simply going to say yield wait 4 seconds, just like it sounds, and then inside of another parentheses, I'll just say 1 to make it nice and simple. Make sure you close off that initial parentheses, semicolon, and then underneath this we'll say explode. And again, anything that comes after this yield is going to have to wait for the yield to come true, basically. So this is a nice way just to make things wait if you need to. And since it's in function start, this will happen right upon start. So 1 second after the game starts, we're going to explode and destroy the ship, as long as everything works. So let's give that a try. Save it. Back to here. And hit play. Starts, kaboom. Perfect. So we know that it is exploding. Let's make sure we get a random one here. Different. And we could get just about anyone here. So, looks nice and random. Kaboom. Okay, so we've got that. Next, I guess we can move right on to making the ship explode when it actually hits something. So at this point, don't forget to remove this auto explode function here, or your game will be over very shortly. Save it. And then we want to make this collide with items. So we're going to create yet another semi-custom function. It's one that's already built into Unity, but we can call it here. So we'll say function on collision enter. And then we're going to say hit info. So we're creating a variable inside of here. I'll explain this in just a second. And this is collision. And again, the curly brackets to hold everything inside of there. So this onCollisionEnter function is special in that we don't have to call it manually, but Unity will automatically, as soon as this object that the script is attached to, as soon as it whacks into something, onCollisionEnter will automatically be called on it. So we can just set this up in here, and it will automatically also pass us some very nice information. So that's why we're setting this up here. So we're going to take the information that we get when that function is called. We're going to call it hit info, and it's a type of collision, which is it just has to be collision. The name can be anything you want, but it has to be a type of collision in this case. So with this, we can do some nice things. The hit info can be anywhere from exactly where we hit the item, the speed that it was, what the actual item was. All sorts of things can come out of it. In this case, all we really want is the speed at which we hit it. So to do that, we will say if hit info, and I'm using the if, I guess, because in this case I want to check if we hit it fairly hard, then explode, of course. So if hit info dot relative velocity dot magnitude. So the hit info dot the velocity we hit it at, its magnitude is just as it sounds, I guess, how big this hit actually was. So if that's, say, greater than 2, then explode. So let's save that, make sure we got everything right there. No big nasty red errors, so we should be good to go. Let's give it a quick try and see if we can knock into things just very slightly and no longer explode. Alright. And a little bit harder. Kaboom. Okay, so that actually seems about right for the hit force we want. Of course, you can change this all you like if you need to. But we'll stick with that. One thing, real quick, another useful handy feature is if you want to check exactly how hard you are actually hitting it, you can use the print function, of course, and say, let's print this actual number. And now down in the area over here, in the readout there, if I move the ship and hit anything, we get the exact number that we are hitting it at. So it's a good way just to check and see exactly what it's coming up with at what speed. And also just, as always, to make sure your script is working properly. Okay, so we've got it hitting stuff and exploding. Now I guess we'd want to make it not explode when we hit the landing pad. And then after that we'll make it, of course, activate that landing pad when you hit it. So let's see. So if we hit it, if the magnitude is too much, it should always explode. However, if you land safely, so you're not hitting it that hard, it should activate the landing pad. So let's say else. So in this case, it was not too hard to hit, so we're going to do something else here. But we have to check if this was the landing pad. So else if, else if the hit info. We're going to dig into this info again, and we're going to say hitinfo.gameObject.tag equals landing pad. And in this case, we're going to print, let's say, landing, in parentheses, or not parentheses, quotations here, landing pad hit. Save that. And now we have an extra thing here, the gameObject.tag. Tags are something you can attach to game objects, and they're exactly as they sound, like you might tag something on the web or whatnot. We can tag it as a landing pad, and then this is a little better, or actually sometimes much more efficient way than saying if the gameObject.name equals something. You can also search the entire hierarchy for an object by tag. It's just a much better, again, more efficient way of figuring out exactly what you hit than going down to the exact name. And tags you can set in Unity. Oops, we've got a problem there. I forgot my double equal sign. After all that talk about it in the last tutorial, let's put that back. And there we go. We're good. So tags we can set up if we select the prefab. And sorry if this is confusing. We're running into just a thing that has a great way to remember this is bad, to not name things well. I named this power station. I'm referring to it as a landing pad in my script. They're the same thing as I went over, I think, in a previous tutorial. I'm just kind of thinking of them as the same thing here. It's a power station on the mine. It also happens to be the landing pad. But just don't practice what I preach in this regard. Try to name things more carefully. So anyway, power station. Let's go ahead and rename that while we're at it. Landing pad. If you rename a prefab, it's neat. It'll rename it in the actual editor if you haven't changed that. In this case, again, while we're at it, let's get even better here and give these an actual name like landing pad A and landing pad B. And that way we know exactly which one we've hit. I'm going to switch that around so this first one is A right there. Okay, so a little bit of organization taken care of. We wanted to set this up so that it has a special landing pad tag on it. If you select the prefab, is usually the best way to do tags so that it applies instantly to all of the instances of that prefab. And up here under tag, you'll see that this is currently untagged. And if we click that, we get all the available tags. And obviously, landing pad is not one of them. So we'll go down to add tag. And over here, if you click the little down arrow, don't accidentally use one of these layers. Won't do anything bad, but it won't do anything good either. Click the down arrow to get the tags. And let's add in landing pad. Make sure capitals, spaces, all that is exactly the same. It will be picky about that. And then on the landing pad, set the tag to landing pad. And now if we go back to each of these, we see that it now has the tag set right there. So let's save that. Make sure I have the script saved. I do. And give it a quick play to see what happens if we land right on this landing pad. Not too hard. Yep. And sure enough, we land on it and we get that little printout showing that we have done so. Let's make sure we can still explode if we do hit that landing pad too hard. Can't make the game too easy. Kerboom. Okay. And we did not get an extra landing pad hit. This was already there, so we know it's triggering it just right. So it's hitting it. Now what we want to do is actually activate that landing pad. So in this case, we're going to do some script creating of a new one and then activate that actual script. I'll leave this print here just so I can keep checking if that is working correctly in case we change any more. And we're going to go over to your project folder and create a new script. Call this landing pad. This will be a very simple script, just enough to allow it to be activated. And in this case, in the activation, we want to change a couple things. We're going to change a color that's on it and also the material that's on it. Things that you can definitely reuse in all sorts of other projects. We'll just check this out real quick. So again, create a variable, and we're going to call this station light, and that will be a light. And we're going to have a on material, that's a material, and a on color, and that's simply a color. And then we need a custom function that we're going to call when this landing pad is hit. And this will be called function activate. And once again, just to test this, sometimes I overtest things, but I like to make sure as I go, kind of plot along methodically and just make sure things work. I'm going to say on activate, print, I've been activated. We could take this a step further and actually say GameObject.name, we'll get that name, plus, and then has been activated. So what this will do is print out the game object's name plus has been activated, so we can tell exactly which one has been activated. And let's go over to the player controller script, back to that. And instead of simply printing something out, I'm going to change this to, well, we'll have to get a hold of that script on the other objects. So I guess we're jumping ahead a little, but this works. This is one of the slightly more complex we'll be doing here with this, the scripting, but it's something you will use over and over and over, and that is accessing scripts in other objects. And there are some semi-shortcut ways you can do this, but it's going to cause problems. Again, going back to the pragma strict thing we went over in the previous tutorial, if you're going to Android or iOS, you get some problems if you use shortcuts. So in this case, we'll do this the long, kind of tedious way, but the way that will always work. So what we need to do is first create a variable that we're going to use to hold the script on the landing pad, which we want to again access from within our player script. So we'll say variable, let's do landing pad, and then we have the type, and this is where we tell it exactly what the name of that script is going to be. So before you can access it, in this case we have to know exactly what it is. In our case, of course, it's landing pad is the name of that script. So landing pad becomes the type instead of game object or transform or particle system or something. It's just a landing pad is the type. And then we tell it what that landing pad is. So landing pad equals hitinfo.gameObject, and then we actually want to get a component from the landing pad. In this case, the component is the script called landing pad. So just like it sounds, we can do hitinfo.gameObject.getComponent, and it is called landing pad. And then we want to do something to that script. So we'll say landing pad dot, and now we can access this just as we're doing any other component. If it would be like, a light dot do something, or any variable we have in here, or the game object dot something, we can simply say landing pad, and we're accessing that script. Landing pad dot activate, and make sure you have these parentheses on the end there. So we're going to get the script called landing pad off of the object that we hit, and then we're going to tell that script that we just grabbed, tell it to do a function called activate. One thing important is that if you hit an object, that does not have that script on there, but you try to call it, you're going to get an error. So again, that's another reason why we want to first check for the tags. We know we've hit the right thing, so we know we can search for that script. So we're not going to have any errors here. So that will call the activate function that we've set up here. Oops. Let's give that a try. Let it compile. Oops, we've got an error somewhere. Forgot a semicolon on the end. Simple error. Okay. If you get these little yellow errors, don't worry about them. It's not a big deal, at least not at this point. So you can ignore that safely. Just give this a play and see if when we land on that landing pad, we now get a message telling us exactly what we landed on. Oh, sure enough, we have not added the actual landing pad script to the landing pad. That would be important. So let's grab any one of these in the hierarchy here and drag that landing pad script onto it. And then hit apply, so that goes to the other one. Make sure that's okay, hasn't changed. Okay, try that one more time. So we maneuver our ship over and onto that. And there we go. Landing pad A has been activated. So it looks like everything worked out okay there. And now we want to actually do something for this activation, of course. So let's take out this print, no longer need that. And in this case, I would like to change the material to a new one and also change the color to a new one. So I'm going to say renderer, so directly access the render component on this landing pad, dot material equals on material, and station light dot color equals on color. Simple as that. And now we'll need to create a special material for the landing pad, so we have both on and off materials. So if you go into the materials folder in your landing pad, select the regular landing pad material, hit Control D to make a copy, and I'm going to call this just underscore on. And with these new files for this tutorial, you should now, under textures, have a landing pad green texture, and you can drag and drop that right onto the texture slot for the landing pad on material. If you created your own landing pad and texture and such, just go ahead and create another material, or a texture that will be its on texture. So in this case, I just made it glow green when on, and then the orange is the default off or waiting texture. So go ahead and create that. And then again, when you import it, make sure you set it to texture type advanced and generate bitmaps off. We don't want any extra bitmaps for this game. Okay, so we have our special material. If you go to the landing pad, we can drag that new material into the on material. And the on color, this is the color that we're going to have sort of a station light change to. One more thing we need to create, so we'll go game object, create other point light. And I want this to be part of the landing pad. I'm going to drag it right up and onto it and set it to 0, 0, 0 for all the position coordinates, and then just situate it in a place that you like. Maybe make it a bit more visible here. And I'll give it a default on color, which again I'll keep kind of orange to stay with the theme here. And maybe bump up the intensity a bit. So get that about where you want it, and then we're going to name that the station light. And then drag and drop that station light into the station light variable, and change the on color to whatever your on color happens to be. In my case, green, to sync up with the green new material. So we'll set that, and then hit apply. Make sure it worked over to the other one. Alright. Yep, that looks good. And we're ready to go with that, I believe. So now we have our script on there. And on activate, we're going to change the material to this on material and change the color to the on color. So let's give that a try. Maneuver over to the station. Land real nice, and there we go. So as we land, now the material has become green and our color has also become green. So I think that's about it for this tutorial. We've got, like I said, it seems fairly simple, just the ability to explode your ship or land it. We're activating the landing pads. All we need to do now is really in the next tutorial set up the GUI, some win-lose conditions. Couldn't quite get to it in this tutorial, it's already getting pretty long. But lots of good things here. Just try and reapply these to all sorts of games you're creating. The collisions and the accessing other scripts on objects, all very good things. The yield function, I'm sure you'll find useful for all sorts of good things if you need to make something wait. And don't forget to experiment with a lot of these things, especially if you're looking into these the detonator bits. Changing a lot of these settings, you can make them look a lot cooler, sometimes a lot worse, but of course it's all part of the fun, digging into it. Okay, so thanks again for watching, and don't forget to check out the next one. We'll get an actual GUI in there and really get this one more step closer to the very final full game. We'll probably have one last one after the GUI just to tweak things and get it all good. Thanks for watching, sticking through this long tutorial, and see you next time.